Welcome to Sukkos before Sukkos. Today we begin Perek Aleph, the first chapter of Sukkos, Mishna Vov, the sixth Mishnah. Just to summarize, we've learned that the dinim of schach, the material used to cover the sukkah, must grow from the ground and must be something that doesn't mekabel tumah, that's not susceptible to impurity. So now the Mishnah discusses the following. The Mishnah says, Mesachachin b'nesorim, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. One may use for schach wooden beams, wooden boards. You see, these are things, wood is something that grows from the ground. And also, if it's just a beam, if it hasn't been used or made into a utensil, it doesn't yet become susceptible to impurity. And therefore, one could actually use it for schach. Rav Meir prohibits it. Now, the Gemara explains like this, that actually it depends which beams we're talking about. The Gemara says that there's a problem with beams because wooden beams, even though theoretically they're okay for schach, but they're too similar to a regular ceiling, tikra, just a ceiling of a building, and therefore if we allow people to use beams for schach, people might just think they can just sit in their house. So it depends at what level we become cautious. So the Gemara explains like this, that if the wooden beam is 4 tfachim wide, meaning it's roughly 32 centimeters wide, 4 tfachim, 4 handbreadths wide, then according to everyone, we decree, even though theoretically it's good for schach, but we say it may not be used for schach. If it's less than 3 tfachim wide, everyone agrees, less than 3 tfachim is just a little beam, and it may be used for schach. The machlokes, the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, if the beam is between 3 and 4. Rav Meir says once you go out of 3, 3 is a significant measurement, and therefore it may not be used for schach. Rabbi Yehuda only says it only becomes similar to a ceiling when it has a more significant measurement of the width of 4 tfachim, and that's the dispute. Neser shehu rochav nosan aleh neser shehu rochav arbot tfachim ksheira ubilvad shel yishem tachtov. However, if you did use a beam that was 4 tfachim wide, where according to everyone it may not be used for schach, so therefore it's considered invalid schach, it doesn't mean that the whole sukkah is invalid. For example, if you have a sukkah and you put the beam on the side of the sukkah, that's got 4 tfachim, so it's not considered good schach, but it doesn't mean that the sukkah is a problem. The sukkah is still kosher as long as you don't actually sit or sleep under that beam. Now this goes into another halacha called doifen akuma, which means that if you have invalid schach on the side of the sukkah, so you've got the wall and the invalid schach is on the side going into the sukkah, right? So we say that the sukkah is still kosher as long as the invalid schach is less than 4 cubits, less than 4 amas, because then it's just considered a continuation of the wall. You may not sit under that part, but it's still, the sukkah is still kosher. Mishnah Zayin, the 7th Mishnah. Tikra she'ein oleho ma'azevo. Now, let's say you had a ceiling of beams. You had a room that was covered in wooden beams. That was the original ceiling, without any cement covering over the beams. So therefore, theoretically, you've got a situation where it's already like schach. The problem is that it wasn't made as schach, it was made as a ceiling, as a regular room ceiling, and that would really cause the room to be invalid, and also it becomes automatic schach, and we learned before that schach must be put there as schach, it cannot become schach passively. So, Rabbi Yehuda, we have it's sort of a double layer machlokes, double layer dispute here. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's a dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Now, Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that you cannot use beams that are... Rabbi Yehuda was one who said you could use beams as long as it's not 4 tfachim wide. So let's say these beams are between 3 and 4 tfachim. So he says, Beis Shammai say, Mefakbek v'noitel achas mi beintaim. What you have to do is, first of all, the beams that you use, you have to lift up and put back on the roof. And also, you must remove every second beam. Because since all the beams were there as a ceiling, so therefore we're not happy to leave all the beams there. We need you to remove every second one so it's clear that it's not the same as a ceiling. Beis Hillel say no. You do one of the two things. You can either lift each beam and put it back, or you just take every second one away and it's all good. Rav Reb Meir says no, as long as the beams are the right width. There's no machlokes, there's no dispute. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel maintain that noitel achas mi beintayim ve'einoin mefakvek. You just remove every second beam. You don't have to pick up anything. Just remove every second beam. You must remove every second beam, and then it's okay. Finally, Mishnah Ches. Hamakoros sukosei bashpudin oy ba'aruchei samita. How about if you put over your sukkah roof spit rods, metal spit rods, which are invalid schach, or beams from a bed which have already been made into a utensil and therefore they're no longer good for schach because they're now susceptible to tumah. But you put them there not to cover the whole roof, but you put them there with spaces in between and you fill the spaces with kosher schach. Says the Mishnah, Imi revach b'neihem kemoisam kasheira. If the space between each invalid pole is at least as big, and as the Gemara explains, as big and a bit more spacious than the pole, kasheira, this is kosher. In other words, theoretically, if you have poles which are holding up the schach, that are invalid schach, as long as the space between the poles is a bit more than the poles itself, it's still kosher. Now, there's a lot of qualifications to this, and therefore no one should learn from this halachically, and you have to ask a question if it becomes practical. But theoretically, the sukkah is kosher as long as the spaces between each invalid beam is as big or a bit bigger than the beam itself, and of course as long as the beam is not too wide. And finally, the Mishnah concludes with a halacha, ha'choitet ba'godish la'asos b'sukkah eino sukkah. If someone has a haystack, a very big haystack, and what someone did was they carved into the haystack a sukkah, because hay is kosher schach. So they created a sukkah within the haystack, so they created 3 walls or 4 walls, and they are now sitting in that little sukkah. That sukkah is not kosher, because going back to the principle we said before, when you make a sukkah, you must put the schach on the sukkah. You cannot have a sukkah be made automatically. And therefore, since the walls were made and dug out before the schach was actually placed there, even though passively, automatically, indirectly, you have a kosher sukkah, theoretically, it's not kosher because it was made automatically and it wasn't made. It's called tasa v'loy min ha'osri. Have a great day.